he was using some local anesthetic, some Novocaine something, and he was putting some Demerol in there and a little B12 in there, and gosh, he felt great afterwards, you know.
He waited more than 40 years to say it, not because he was scared of the truth, but because of the promise he made to the man the world called a king. "I didn't just lose a patient that night," the doctor says now, his voice thin with age but steady with purpose. "I broke a promise I made to him, and I've carried that weight longer than anyone knows." For decades, Elvis Presley's doctor watched the world stitch together its own version of what happened. Documentaries, gossip, headlines, arguments about pills and pressure and personal choices. Every time a pundit said he threw his life away, the doctor felt a jolt in his chest because he knew something they didn't. He knew the story wasn't that simple, and the ending wasn't inevitable. He'd seen Elvis in moments no fan, no friend, no manager ever did. Moments stripped of the rhinestones, the fame, the spotlight. He'd seen the exhaustion beneath the legend, the fear behind the charm, and the desperation behind the smile that millions mistook for invincibility. The first time the doctor met him, he expected arrogance. He expected a celebrity who would treat him like staff. Instead, Elvis apologized 3 times in the first 5 minutes. "Sorry to drag you out this late, sir," he said softly, rubbing his forehead. It wasn't the voice of a superstar. It was the voice of a man afraid he was becoming a burden. That impression never left him. The world saw Elvis as untouchable, unstoppable, a force of nature who could command crowds of thousands with a single hip shake. But behind closed doors, the doctor saw a man running himself into the ground, fighting a schedule that didn't care whether he slept, ate, or stood upright. What the public calls decline, the doctor calls something else. A man begging for help in the only ways he knew how. But the machine around Elvis, management, contracts, pressure, didn't leave much room for begging, and that's where the secret begins. The doctor remembers late-night calls from Graceland, not dramatic emergencies, quiet ones. Elvis couldn't sleep. His heart raced. His hands shook. He was tired in a way rest couldn't fix. A normal patient would have canceled everything. But Elvis wasn't allowed to be normal. Every time the doctor suggested rest, someone in the background whispered about commitments, bookings, finances, the colonel. Elvis would lower his eyes and say, "I'll be fine. Just need a little help to get through this run." Those little helps became the doctor's battlefield. He tried adjusting medications, cutting down dangerous combinations, insisting on health tests, even demanding breaks. But every medical suggestion he made ran into the same wall: Elvis's fear of letting people down. The doctor says this part with bitterness. He trusted everyone, and almost no one protected him. For years he stayed quiet, tied by medical confidentiality and trapped by a world that preferred the clean, convenient narrative. Elvis overindulged. Elvis spiraled. Elvis caused his own ending. The doctor says those headlines cut deeper than anyone imagines, because Elvis predicted them. The doctor remembers the night clearly. A quiet room. No entourage, no pressure, just the two of them. Elvis had suffered another episode, exhaustion mixed with panic, mixed with the guilt he carried like a second skin. He sat there, shoulders slumped, eyes red, and he said something the doctor has never repeated until now. "If anything happens to me, they're gonna say I did this to myself. They'll never know how hard I tried." The doctor didn't know how to respond. How do you reassure a man who already feels like a myth being pulled apart by the people feeding off him? Elvis asked him for something that night, a request the doctor wasn't sure he could fulfill. "Don't let them forget the truth. promise me. And he promised. But then came the years of silence, the pressure from lawyers, the confidentiality agreements, the fear of sparking lawsuits that would devastate Presley's daughter, and the doctor's own guilt that he might have acted too late, spoken too softly, or walked away when he could have fought harder. So he kept the secret. He watched the world swallow the version of the story that was easiest to digest. He kept that final conversation locked behind his ribs, where it stayed for decades, a weight that grew heavier every time someone called Elvis weak, reckless, or hopeless. And now, older, frailer, and finally willing to break the silence, the doctor says the one thing none of those documentaries ever did. Elvis Presley didn't give up. He didn't roll over. He tried to save himself, and I'm the one who failed him. But he pauses because that isn't the whole secret, not even close. The truth I've carried all these years, he says slowly, isn't about how he died. It's about the one chance I had to save him, and the choice I made that night. He inhales deeply. Everything changed because of that choice. He said the moment that still wakes him at night didn't happen in a hospital or during a crisis. It happened on an ordinary afternoon inside Graceland, an afternoon that revealed just how broken Elvis's world had become. The doctor remembers stepping through the doorway and feeling instantly that something was wrong. Not medically, environmentally. Too many voices, too many demands, too much urgency, all aimed at a man who could barely keep his eyes open. Elvis was slumped on the edge of the bed, one hand pressed to his temple, the other clutching a schedule. A schedule, the doctor says, that was an insult to biology. Multiple shows, flights, meetings, rehearsals, no room for sleep, no room for recovery, barely room to breathe. He wasn't declining because he was reckless, the doctor says. He was declining because he was treated like he didn't have a human body. The doctor ordered basic vitals. They weren't just bad, they were alarming. Heart rate, irregular. Blood pressure, unstable. Elvis tried to joke about it, mumbling, "Guess the engine's running hot, Doc." But his hands were trembling, his voice cracked. And when the doctor asked how long he'd felt like this, Elvis whispered, "Longer than I've been allowed to say." The doctor told him firmly that the next series of shows needed to be canceled, not delayed, canceled. Elvis didn't die because he didn't care. He died because he tried to fight, and the world didn't let him. But that isn't the real secret. The real secret is the note. The doctor says it happened on a quiet, late evening at Graceland, one of the rare nights when the phones weren't ringing and the pressure wasn't pounding through the walls like a heartbeat. Elvis had called him back, not for medication, not for tests, but for something far heavier. When the doctor walked in, Elvis wasn't on the couch or the bed. He was sitting at a desk, a small piece of paper in front of him. His hands were shaking, not from medication, but from the weight of what he was about to say. "I need you to take this," Elvis whispered, "but don't show anyone. Not yet." It was a note, just a few sentences, handwritten, raw. Words that carried the truth he was too afraid to let the world see. In that note, Elvis admitted what he never said in public, that he didn't feel in control anymore, that the schedule was killing him, that the medications weren't his escape. They were the only way he'd been taught to survive the pressure, and that he was trying, really trying, to change before it was too late. But the line that broke the doctor the most was this one. If anything happens, don't let them say I gave up. Tell Lisa I tried. Tell her the show wouldn't let me stop." The doctor held the note like it was a dying heartbeat. He wanted to argue, to tell Elvis he was being dramatic, that they'd fix things before it ever came to that. But he couldn't lie. He'd seen the damage. He'd seen the exhaustion. He'd seen the machine around Elvis tightening like a fist. Then Elvis added the part that became the doctor's burden for the next 40 years. "Don't show this while I'm alive. They'll twist it. They'll use it to tear apart everyone I care about." So the doctor promised. He didn't fully understand what he was promising, but he promised. And the guilt began there, because not long after that night, the doctor reached the breaking point. He confessed in Section 2. The last moment, he could have forced a stop. The last moment, he could have taken the note straight to the authorities, to the press, to anyone who would listen. But he didn't. And when Elvis died, the doctor's silence became a prison. He says he remembers the exact moment he heard the news. He remembers the stillness, the ringing in his ears, the first thought that shattered him. "I should have stopped this. I should have done more." The world erupted with blame, pills, indulgence, irresponsibility. People shook their heads and called Elvis tragic, reckless, self-destructive. And the doctor stood there with a note in his pocket that proved the opposite. A note that showed Elvis didn't surrender. He didn't collapse into addiction willingly. He didn't choose the outcome. He had fought, begged, tried, and been pushed until he had nothing left. But the doctor couldn't speak. Lawyers circled, management threatened, confidentiality hung over him like a noose. And he knew that if he revealed the note too early, it wouldn't protect Elvis's legacy. It would rip apart his daughter's world, fuel lawsuits, and turn the truth into ammunition. So he hid it. He kept it in a sealed envelope at the back of a drawer, opening it every year on the anniversary of Elvis's death. He read the words like a confession he couldn't offer the world. Then he pressed the paper back into hiding and carried the burden into another year. He came close to destroying it once. He'd watched another documentary that blamed Elvis for everything: his weight, his choices, his weakness. It enraged him so deeply that he took the note to the trash, ready to burn it. But something stopped him. A clip of Lisa Marie, smiling, defending her father, talking about how much he loved her, how misunderstood he was. The doctor froze. The note felt heavier than ever. He realized something painful. If he destroyed it, the world would never know the truth. Elvis needed someone, anyone, to carry for him. And if he kept it hidden forever, he'd break the only promise Elvis ever begged him to keep. So he took the note out of the trash. He smoothed the crumpled edges. He locked it away again. And he waited for the moment Elvis asked him to choose. Don't tell them until they're ready to hear it. Now, he says, the world is finally ready. And the truth he's about to reveal is the one thing that changes Elvis's story forever. He waited nearly half a lifetime for the moment when the world might finally understand Elvis, not as a headline, not as a cautionary tale, but as a human being who fought harder than anyone ever knew. And now, sitting with the note in his hands, the doctor finally says the words he has been terrified and obligated to say. This is what he wanted you to know. He unfolds the paper, smoothing its worn edges. The writing is shaky, the ink fading, but the meaning feels sharper than ever. Elvis wrote that he was scared, that he felt trapped, that he didn't know how to slow down without disappointing the people who depended on him. He admitted he was ashamed of needing help, terrified of being seen as weak, and desperate for a way to break free from the pressure that was crushing him. He wrote, "I don't want them thinking I quit on myself. I didn't. I'm trying, Doc. I swear I'm trying." The doctor's voice cracks as he reads it, because for decades the world believed the opposite. They believed Elvis spiraled. They believed he didn't care. They believed he gave up on discipline, on health, on life. But this note, this fragile, painful confession, proves that Elvis never stopped trying, even when the machine around him made trying nearly impossible. The doctor reads the next part aloud, knowing this is the line that will change everything. "Tell Lisa I wasn't running from her. Tell her I was fighting to still be here, even when the show wouldn't let me stop." That sentence breaks him every time, because he remembers the way Elvis said Lisa when he spoke about her. The softness, the pride, the fear of becoming a memory she couldn't understand. For the doctor, revealing this note is the hardest thing he's ever done, not because it condemns anyone directly, but because it reveals the truth in a way that strips away decades of myth, of judgment, of easy answers people clung to in order to make sense of his death. "I didn't speak sooner," he says, "because I knew they'd turn it into a weapon against managers, against family members, against Elvis himself. He didn't want lawsuits or scandal. He didn't want Presley's legacy ripped apart by anger instead of healed by understanding. Most of all, he didn't want Lisa Marie growing up with the world shouting accusations at her father." But over time, the silence became a wound that never closed. He watched documentaries flatten Elvis into a caricature. He watched people mock the final years. He watched fans argue about the cause of death as if the truth were a game. And with every passing year, he felt the promise he made to Elvis slipping further away. Then, he says, something changed. He saw younger fans discovering Elvis, not the icon, but the man. They asked different questions. They wanted compassion, not blame. They wanted to understand the pressure, the fame, the impossible expectations Elvis lived under. They were ready to see him as human. And that's when the doctor realized Elvis's final request had finally come true. Wait until they're ready to hear it. Now the doctor says the truth plainly. Elvis didn't destroy himself. He was destroyed by a world that demanded too much and gave him too little room to breathe. He emphasizes that this isn't about attacking individuals, though there were certainly people who pushed him too far. It's about exposing a system that treated Elvis like an endless resource instead of a living, fragile man with fears, limits, and a heart that carried the weight of millions. The note doesn't excuse every choice Elvis made, but it reframes them. It shows the internal battle behind the headlines. It reveals a man trying to claw his way back to health while being dragged toward the stage again and again. The doctor leans back, hands trembling. "I couldn't save him. I failed him when it mattered most, but I can save the truth. And that's why I'm speaking now." He says he hopes fans don't walk away from this story with bitterness, but with empathy. Empathy for a man who lifted the world while carrying a mountain on his shoulders. Empathy for a father who adored his daughter. Empathy for an artist who fought harder than anyone knew. He ends with a line that feels like both confession and redemption. He wasn't weak. He wasn't careless. He was tired, and he was trying. And now, at last, the world will finally know that. If this changed how you see Elvis, tell me in the comments. Do you think stars today face the same pressures he did? Should doctors break their silence sooner when fame becomes dangerous? Share your thoughts and subscribe if you want the next untold chapter of Elvis's story.